We are about to spelunk deep in the belly of the ship to look at some of the places too remote and difficult to be safely visited by guests. Going there requires difficult ladder climbs and entry through multiple hatches and doors. You will see quite a bit of rust and dirt in many of the spaces. While it may be a little distressing, know that they are in stable condition and do not affect the basic integrity of the ship. In fact, if you look closely, many of them have new decks. These are actually the inner bottom of the ship that was replaced not too long ago to seal the ship's interior from potential flooding. Repairs to the compartments will happen as the money and resources become available to do the work. You will be seeing a number of short clips of compartments within this video. Please be a little forgiving when you watch them. They were not originally shot with viewing by others in mind, but were meant to orient the spaces for still photos that document each compartment. For that reason, most are short on descriptions and may even ignore some significant points of interest within the room. Like the basement in a house, the ship's hold deck requires a lot of climbing and is filled with pipes, wiring, and is where things are stored that aren't needed very often. As you can see in the profile view, it extends the major length of the ship, with much of it taken up by water tanks, fuel tanks, voids, and trimming tanks. However, it also includes a large number of compartments, some of which contain critical machinery. An important characteristic of most of the compartments is that they were used to route much of the wiring and piping that moved electricity, steam, and water throughout the ship. Let's start with a blank plan of the hold deck. We'll begin by filling it with places we cannot visit, then machinery spaces, and finally where we will be going. First are the lower portions of the fuel tanks. You've already looked into some of these if you watched the coal and torpedoes video. Next, we'll add voids. Again, most of these were discussed and many looked into in the coal and torpedoes video. If you look along the outer hull, you can see that the torpedo blisters have been included. You can also see interior voids and cofferdams that protect inner compartments from flooding and also from fuel tank leaks. Next, we have trimming tanks at the bow and stern of the ship. These could be flooded or drained to balance the ship and keep it on an even keel. Beneath the boiler rooms in the center of the ship are the reserve feed water tanks. These provided a source of makeup water constantly required to replace lost feed water going to the boilers. Closer to the bow are the fresh water tanks required by the crew and anything else that had to have clean potable water. The huge quantity of boiler reserve feed water could not be used for these purposes because it contained a level of alkalinity too high to be consumed or used for other purposes. That takes care of locations on the hold deck that cannot be occupied. Next, let's look at some important machinery spaces. These include an emergency electric fire pump room. Next to it is the forward emergency diesel generator room. Just ahead of the boiler rooms is the forward dynamo condenser room that contains the condenser, pumps, and lubricating gear that serve the dynamo room located directly above it. You've already seen it if you watched the Getting Electrical Power video. Behind the boiler rooms is the aft dynamo condenser room that filled the same functions for the aft dynamos. Located in the lower levels of the port and starboard engine rooms are the engine foundations, called bed plates, along with auxiliary equipment that was critical to the operation of the engines. Closest to the stern is the aft emergency diesel generator room. And finally, there are 3 more emergency electric fire pump rooms located next to the 2 dynamo condenser rooms and aft of the starboard engine room. What remains are the compartments shaded in dark green. While they don't contain critical machinery, they are important as locations for pipe and wiring to be run. Plus, they served well as storerooms for a wide variety of items that included supplies, spare parts, and even consumables for the care and feeding of the crew. Our first stop is in compartment A3, the hauser and cordage storeroom, where rope of all sizes and types were kept. Notice how narrow it is due to its location close to the bow of the ship. I'm at the bottom of the trunk at frame 13. I'm standing looking forward into room A3, which is hauser and cordage storage. As we step into the room, first thing you'll immediately see is that the hull is coming together toward the bow. The bow is only about 30 feet, perhaps, 50 feet forward of us. That forward bulkhead separates us from the gasoline storage room. As we pan around, this is the inner bottom, and then looking back toward the trunk, we have a manhole that leads into the double hull. The 3 cables are part of the degaussing system. And then we have storage racks with modern water and beverage bottles that have been left behind by staff or work crew. Here is compartment A5, C&R stores where maintenance and repair items were stored. The most notable feature in it are the electrical cables and junction box on the bulkheads that were part of the ship's degaussing system. This system protected the ship against magnetic anti-shipping mines. We are at the hold deck level, at the bottom of trunk at frame 13. And we're looking aft into compartment A5, which is C&R stores. As once again, we can see that the hull is coming together a little bit wider than an A3 forward. And there has been a barricade, and that pipe and valve is modern. See if we can unblur it. And obviously that's to drain tanks in the inner bottom. This is the starboard bulkhead, which is the inner bottom once again with a manhole that opens up into that space. We have a junction box located on the forward bulkhead. And these again are cables that are part of the degaussing system. Port bulkhead once again is curved and sloped. The deck consists of portable plates, which I'll try to lift one to take a look at the tops of the tanks below. And that is one of the tank tops formed by the inner bottom. This is passage A10, whose main function is to provide access to the next 2 compartments we will visit. The pipes and manifold contained here make it worth taking a few seconds to look at it. Okay, we're in passage A11 on hold deck, looking port. Again, here's a suction manifold with the suction inlets traveling aft. Here's the manifold with yet another set of valves. The lower pipes go down to compartments in the inner bottom to drain them. And once again, reach rods going up to the 3rd deck level. We will now look at the emergency electric fire pump located in compartment A13P. This is one of 4 located on the hold deck. Most of the work was performed by very high capacity, steam-operated combination bilge and fire pumps located on higher decks. These electric pumps were added to provide additional capacity if it was needed. More importantly, they could be used to fight fires if steam was lost and the other pumps failed. On the hold deck level in A13P, which is emergency fire pump room, here is the pump itself with appropriate pipes and valving, the electric motor that drives it, and then the controller. Here's the main disconnect for it. And then here are the contactors and protective circuits for it. And then after that, I do believe it is nothing, but we'll be sure. Yeah, nothing. Here is the back side of the control panel with the power busing coming into it. The forward emergency diesel generator is located in A13S. Its importance almost doesn't need to be stated. This and the aft 100,000 watt DC generator could be tied into the ship's system to either provide supplemental power or provide emergency power for lighting pumps and other critical systems if steam and regular power was lost. One other thing to note is that the generators and pumps on this level could be remotely controlled from higher decks, meaning that these spaces did not require crew in them. Okay, here's forward emergency diesel generator room. Still in excellent condition. Aft is a 100 kilowatt, 120 volt DC generator. We're walking aft. There's the control board for it. And then as we pan forward, here's the fusible disconnect panel and distribution panel for it. Here's a battery charging station. And then a valve into the inner bottom that I'm frankly not sure what it's for. As I swing around to the starboard side, there's CO2 bottles, a hose reel, next is A16S, the 100-pound bomb and fuse storeroom. The bombs and fuses stored here were not only in a very safe location, they could be easily hauled up a vertical trunk that extended up from the compressor room located immediately above to the main deck. Note the extra measures taken for storage of the fuses. This is compartment A16S. We're on hold deck level immediately below the air compressor room. This is 100-pound aviation bomb stores. We're standing at the forward end of the compartment looking aft. Just on the outboard side is the fuse locker for the bombs. Other than that, nothing particularly insightful in here. There's a sprinkler control for the fuse locker. As we pan around, we are now looking aft. There's the ladder accessing the compartment, the hatch, and then there is also an explosion-proof, appears to be an explosion-proof light fixture. A17S is Ordnance Stores. This would be one of several storage locations for many of the parts and supplies required to service a variety of guns, from the 20mm automatic cannon up to the 14-inch main battery. We are in A17S, which is hold deck level. It's a storage room located on the starboard side below an optical storage room off of the compressor room. As you can see, the deck is curved. This is the inner bottom, and there's some very heavy structural members here also. And then what very likely could be a fuel oil valve with reach rod. We'd have to double check the plans to make sure that's what it's for. And this is looking forward. A18S is one of many storage locations for provisions, which are usually consumables required by the crew. I am entering A18S, hold deck level, looking forward. As I walk forward, I will pan toward port, and then aft. A20S is another provision storeroom that also contains fuel oil pipes that feed from an inner bottom fuel tank. Attached is a valve with high and low suctions that penetrate into the tank. Also seen is a corrugated section of the large fuel line that serves as an expansion joint. This allowed some movement to relieve stress caused by temperature changes and vibration. I am now entering A20S provisions on hold deck level, looking forward. As you can see, the deck is sloped to follow the curve of the inner hull. As I pan to starboard, you can see considerable fuel piping, valves, numerous valves. And then looking aft. The door is at frame 41. Passage A23S isn't particularly notable, but it serves as a good example of how many of the compartments on the hold deck were accessed. You would climb down a ladder from above into the short passage. From there you could go into 3 or 4 compartments attached to it. The watertight doors connecting them to the passage would remain closed unless something was needed from them. This was done to limit flooding in the event of a hull leak.
I'm in the trunk, or the passage on whole deck level that accesses A20S and A25MS. I'm standing at the port end of it looking starboard. Here is a compartment that I don't know the number. This is A20S and A25MS.
Here is A24P Electrical Supply and Issuing Room. You can see there are a large number of shelves and cubby holes that could be used to store and organize an equally large number of small items.
This is A24P Electrical Supply Issuing Room on the port side of forward condenser pump room. Okay, looking forward, and now we'll pan aft. And again, forward, and then looking into some type of manhole, through some type of manhole into a trunk. I'll determine what that is.
We will next look into C10, a major wiring passage. Wiring that comes down from the aft electrical distribution panel feeds through here and aft to everything electrical, including turrets, blowers, lights, and the electric steering motor. For that reason, it is well protected, and even though it may not look like it, the wires were well organized and easily identified.
This is wiring passage C10 that's entered through the aft bulkhead of the aft dynamo condenser room.
We are about to walk through C17, another passage that contains major wiring. This critical location allows a multitude of large load-carrying conductors to be run past the engine rooms and farther aft. Note that while the wire at the forward end appears to be a messy jumble, each has its own gland that seals around it where it penetrates the bulkhead. This helps isolate and limit any potential flooding.
Okay, I'm at the aft end of wiring passage C17 and walking forward through its length. There's actually pretty good air moving through here. I don't know where or why, but I'm not going to complain. So we're basically walking the full length of the engine rooms between the two engine rooms. And here we come up to a big gaggle of wires penetrating the bulkhead. And I will now turn around and we'll look aft.
The last stop is this tiny space, C29 1/2P, that contains two sea chests. Seen in here are the induction and outlet valves for the port engine room condenser. These are attached to the largest openings in the hull below the waterline to provide huge amounts of seawater needed to cool and condense waste steam from the engines. Note that one of them has a steam line running to it. This is the induction valve that sucked in the seawater. Live high-pressure steam was periodically shot into the valve and out through the hull opening to clean the screens that kept out things like fish and seaweed that could hopelessly clog the condenser. The outlet valve and chest did not need steam since it continually pushed water out of the ship and kept itself clear.
I'm in the port sea chest below ice making room, looking forward. We actually have two sea chests in here. There's the forward, and then here is the aft one. And we have to skinny through that manhole to get in here.
So as you can see by this deep dive into the belly of the ship, much of the hold deck was rarely entered by the crew, nor was it necessary. However, that didn't keep it from filling critical roles. Besides serving as the primary location for fuel lines, water lines, and major electrical runs, it was a place where things like screws and nuts, spare fuses, light bulbs, and even food could be stored. While some of these don't sound like very important functions, they were because they freed up higher, more accessible locations in the ship to be used to fill more important roles.